Hi friends, we're jumping into Psycho-Cybernetics Maxwell Malt, and today we're on chapter 10, how to remove emotional scars or how to give yourself an emotional facelift. So he talks about scar tissue and what is it, and it's scar tissue is to form a protective cover or a shell, and its nature is to protect against further pain or injury by forming a callus or a protective shell. So that's scar tissue. And remember, he was a plastic surgeon. Now he talks about emotional injury, and he says we form emotional or spiritual scars for self-protection. We are very apt to become hardened of heart, callous towards the world, or to withdraw within a protective shell. So that's if someone hurts us or rubs us the wrong way or offends us. And then he's talking about one of his clients, one of his patients, and he had a scar from a car accident, and his eye was kind of like pulled up. And then he had some problems with his self-esteem after that. So then Dr. Maltz went in and actually did I can't even think of the word, but he did the surgery to correct the scars. And then after that, the guy totally changed his life and was happy again and was successful in his business. And so he said the real curative agent was not the removal of the scar. It was basically that it changed his self-esteem, his self-perception. So the real curative agent was the removal of the emotional scars that man was carrying. So how emotional scars alienate you from life. Many people have inner emotional scars who have never suffered physical injuries, so you can't see them. And the result on personality is the same. So they have the same problem with their self-esteem, their self-personality, and their coping mechanisms. These people have been hurt or injured by someone in the past. To guard against future injury from that source, they form a spiritual callus, an emotional scar to protect their ego. This scar tissue, however, not only protects them from the individual who originally hurt them, but it protects them from the individual against all other human beings. So, and then basically they're building up walls no one else can get through, not even friend or foe. So if a woman has been hurt by one man and then she vows never to trust any man, or some kid has like a really cruel parent or teacher and they vow never to trust authority figures again, or if a man has had his love rejected by one woman, then he vows to just never be open to any woman. And so that's basically going to hurt the person in the end and not everybody else, because they don't even know why you have those walls up. So excessive protection against the original source of injury can make us more vulnerable and do us even more damage in other areas. The emotional wall that we built up as protection against one person cuts us off from all other human beings and from our real selves. Okay? And then like juvenile delinquents, you know how they basically just push everybody away. And they say deep down, they actually want love. They want someone to be loving towards them, and they want to be able to trust that person, but because they just can't open themselves up again. So, and then he talks about emotional scars to our egos lead to the development of scarred, marred self-image, the picture of a person not liked or accepted by other human beings, the picture of a person who can't get along well in the world in which they live. Okay, so basically that now he starts talking about if you get emotional scars, if you start building up those walls, it's going to start affecting you and your self-image, your self-esteem. And so then Dr. Arthur W. Combs, professor of educational psychology and counseling at the University of Florida. Okay, so he says, the goal of every human being should be to become a self-fulfilled person. This, he says, is not something you're born with. It must be achieved. Self-fulfilled persons have the following 4 characteristics, okay? So self-fulfilled persons is what he says we're striving to be. They see themselves as liked, wanted, acceptable, and able individuals, okay? Number 2, they have a high degree of acceptance of self as they are. So they accept themselves. So they think other people like them. And number 2, they like themselves. 3, they have feelings of oneness with others. And 4, they have a rich store of information and knowledge. So they're constantly pushing themselves, growing themselves, educating themselves, learning something else. They're not sitting stagnant, they're growing. The person with emotional scars not only has a self-image of unwanted, unliked, and incapable person, but he also has an image of the world in which he lives as a hostile place. Okay, remember, I think it was Albert Einstein who said, how you perceive the world, like whether you think it's a nice world or a hostile world, that's going to make a lot of difference on your outlook on like and the experiences you have in life. Okay, so his primary relationship with the world is one of hostility. So those people that are holding on to the emotional scars. And those people are, their concepts are overcoming, combating, and protecting from other people, as opposed to someone who has a self-fulfilled persons. Those people are they base their lives on accepting, cooperating, working with, enjoying with, and basically their life is a lot more enjoyable. So that's what we want to strive for, he says. Okay, he says now they're moving on. 3 rules against immunizing yourself against emotional hurts. So basically, he's going to give you 3 tools so that you don't get all these emotional scars and build up all these emotional walls and miss out on life. So number 1, be too big to feel threatened. If I had to sum this up, basically he says, get a little bit tougher skin and fix your self-esteem. So it is a well-known psychological fact that people who become easily offended have the lowest self-esteem. We are hurt by those things we conceive of as threats to our ego or self-esteem. And if you have a wholesome self-esteem, you're not even really going to worry about half the stuff that those people, that someone else may say. And remember that saying that says, it's none of my business what other people think of me. Okay, so don't worry about other people so much and some of the things they're saying. Just remember, that's a reflection of themselves on themselves. That's not a reflection on you. If you don't, especially if you don't take it to heart and own it and like incorporate it into your thoughts and your words and your mind. Okay, so if the person who feels undeserving, doubts his own capabilities, and has poor opinion of himself, who becomes jealous at the drop of a hat. So insecure people, people with low self-esteem, those are the people who are going to be jealous. So if you see that happening, then, and if you're doing it, then open your eyes to that. Now, he says it's not wise for our physical bodies to make a hard callus or a shell like a turtle, because then you're going to be denied the pleasure of all the sensual feelings. So then he says, okay, we've got this epidermis, and, keeps us, protected from invasion of bacteria, small bumps and bruises, and small pin pricks. So this skin, this epidermis, is doing its job to protect us. We don't need a tortoise shell. It's thick enough to offer protection against even small wounds, but not so thick and hard that it interferes with all feelings. So you still have pleasure of like hugs and touches, and when someone else gives you a massage, you can actually enjoy that. Okay, so he says those people, they need to become thicker skinned, emotionally tougher, so that they will simply ignore petty cuts and minor ego threats. They need to build up their self-esteem and get a better, more adequate self-image of themselves so that they will not feel threatened by every chance remark or innocent act. So sometimes people are offending these people and they're actually not even trying to. They're just saying something and they don't mean to, for it to be taken wrong, and that person just jumps off the cliff and like says they're, it's so offensive. So healthy self-images do not bruise easily. When a person has adequate self-esteem, little slights offer no threat at all. They are simply passed over and ignored. Okay, that's what we want to be. We want to have a little bit of thicker skin and a lot better self-esteem. Okay, so that was the first one. Number 2, self-reliant, responsible attitude makes you less vulnerable. The person who has little or no self-reliance, who feels emotionally dependent on others, makes themselves most vulnerable to emotional hurts. Every human being wants and needs love and affection, but the creative, reliant person also feels the need to give love. Okay, so everybody needs love, but the creative, self-reliant person also feels the need to give love. His emphasis is as much or more on giving as it is getting. He doesn't expect love to be handed to him on a silver platter, so he's not self-centered and everybody needs to worship me and cater to me, nor does he have a compulsive need that everybody must love him and approve of him. He has sufficient ego security to tolerate the fact that certain number of people will dislike him and disprove him. Okay, some people, you're not going to be their cup of tea. Keep moving. Find the people that you do gel with. He feels some sense of responsibility for his life and conceives of himself primarily as one who acts, determines, gives, goes after what he wants, rather than as a person who is passive recipient of all the good things in life. So he goes after what he wants. He's got that self-esteem and that self-confidence, and he's moving and making life happen around him. He's not passive, just sitting by. The passive dependent person turns his entire life over to destiny, and to people and circumstances and luck. He thinks that so life owes him a living and other people owe him consideration, appreciation, love, and happiness. Okay, newsflash, the world does not owe you a living. The world does not owe us a living. And so this is we're still talking about passive dependent person. This is the person who's not driving their life and living their life, okay? This is not what we want. So he makes unreasonable demands and claims on other people and feels cheated, wronged, hurt when they aren't fulfilled. Because life just isn't built that way, he is seeking the impossible and leaving himself wide open to emotional hurts and injuries. Someone has said that their neurotic personality is forever bumping into reality. So this person has it in their mind that everything's owed to them, and they keep getting hurt and beaten down because they somehow believe that everything's owed to them, and it's not. They're bumping into reality. So he says, develop a more self-reliant attitude. Assume responsibility for your own life and emotional needs. So try giving affection, love, approval, acceptance, understanding to other people, and you will find them coming back to you as a sort of reflex reaction. So it's going to, whatever you put out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. So start putting those things out. And if you're hanging around people that are not growing with you, you will find at some point in time you are going to start stepping away from those people, but you will also be gravitated more towards people who are working on themselves and are moving forward and moving up. Let's read that again though. Develop a more self-reliant attitude. Assume responsibility for your own life and emotional needs. You assuming the responsibility is huge because it takes you out of the victim role and it lets you say, okay, I chose all this, or I have responsibility for all this. And then you take another step and you look at the same thing and you say, well, if I'm responsible for that, then I can change it. And now you have all the power. So it changes you from being victim to in control and having the power. So you're going to hear those in everything you read and study and listen to. Okay. So the third one is relax away emotional hurts. So now they're actually talking about scar tissue and emotional scar tissue, and he's kind of making a comparison to kind of let you figure it out. So forming the scar tissue is a natural and automatic thing. Why doesn't scar tissue form when plastic surgeons make the incision? And it's because there is a certain amount of tension in the wound, and just underneath the wound, which pulls the surface of the skin back, creates a gap, so to speak, which is filled by the scar tissue. So that's when you have a scar and it just starts healing naturally. The scar tissue jumps in there and fills it up. Okay, when the plastic surgeon operates, he not only pulls the skin together by sutures, the stitches, he also cuts out a small amount of flesh underneath the skin so that there is no tension present. I'm pretending like I've got a scar on my face. I don't know why. It's just because he keeps bringing up that example throughout the book. The incision heals smoothly, evenly, and with no distorting surface scar. The main part of that, though, is he cuts out a small amount of flesh underneath the skin so there's no tension present. And that's where he's going to make, this is his point right here. It is interesting to note that the same thing happens in the case of an emotional wound. If there is no tension present, there is no disfiguring emotional scar left. So basically, he's going to say you got to get underneath the superficial part and get to the root of it and cut it all out. So he's going to start talking about forgiveness, and basically he's going to compare that to a scalpel where you just cut everything out. You got to get it all cleared out. So when you are suffering tensions brought about by frustration, fear, anger, or depression, those kind of tensions in your actual life, you tend to get more emotional scars. So then he says, well, so we are hurt, we are injured and hurt emotionally, not so much by other people and what they say or don't say, but by our own attitude and our own response. Okay, so now he's going to say, he's going to start talking about you relaxing and not taking it so personal and not not having your feelings and not reacting to it. That's what he's going to start getting to. He's going to say relax. When people do stupid stuff or say stupid stuff, just relax. Don't react to it, because it's the reacting to it that causes your tension of frustration, fear, anger, depression. It's that tension that forms that emotional scar for you. Okay, so when we feel hurt, we feel offended, the feeling is entirely a matter of our own response. In fact, the feeling is our response. So we chose that feeling to respond to something that someone else did. It is our own responses that we have to be concerned about, not other people's. Or we can make no response, remaining relaxed and feel no hurt. So basically, when someone does something, just remain relaxed and feel no hurt. We have to do something to feel fear, anxiety, and anger. No man is hurt but by himself. And Diogenes. Okay, so you alone are responsible for your responses and reactions. You do not have to respond at all. You can remain relaxed and free from injury. So that's why he's saying just don't respond. Don't give it any of your energy. So then how to remove, so that was how to not make new emotional scars. Now we're going to move to how to remove old emotional scars. Sorry, this is where he starts talking about the forgiveness part and cutting it all out, getting to the root of it. Okay, we can prevent and immunize against ourselves against scars by practicing those 3 foregoing rules, but this is how we start getting away from emotional scars that we already have. So in removing old emotional scars, you alone can do the operation. You must become your own plastic surgeon and give yourself a spiritual facelift. The result will be a new life and new vitality, newfound peace, and a newfound peace of mind and happiness. Okay, so basically you're going to have forgiveness so that you have happiness. Forgiveness is for yourself. It's not for other people. You're going to hear that over and over and over. And basically he was saying, like, if you put like a balm or something on your scar, it's not necessarily going to happen, especially if you have major scar tissue. So he's saying you really need to get down underneath it and clear out all the scar tissue, which is basically you need to get down to the emotional scar, clear it all out, and get the, give the forgiveness for yourself that leads you to your happiness. Okay, so then he has an example of a wife who discovers her husband's infidelity, and her minister, psychologist, psychiatrist, everybody tells her to forgive him, and she forgives him, and she becomes a dutiful wife. But she makes his life hell on earth in many subtle ways by the coldness of her heart and by flaunting her moral superiority. When he complains, her answer is, well, dear, I forgive you, but I cannot forget. Okay, her very forgiveness becomes a thorn in his side because he is conscious of the fact and is proof of her moral superiority. And she would have been more kind to him and been happier herself had she refused this type of forgiveness and just left him. Okay, so forgiving people but actually holding something over their head, that's not forgiveness. You're not going to be happy and they're going to be miserable too. And it's basically because you didn't forget the past. However, just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you have to have them in your life. Like, she would have been better off had she left him. She would have been happier, and she wouldn't, she would have moved on to something better in life, is what he said. And it's true. Why are you staying with people and around people that keep screwing you over and you keep forgiving them, thinking that that's what you're supposed to do? No, forgiveness is for you, but you don't have to maintain relationships that are horrible and one-sided and detrimental and toxic to you. Okay. So I can forgive, but I cannot forget is another way of saying I will not forgive. And Henry Ward Beecher, so he says, forgiveness ought to be like a canceled note, torn in two and burned up so that it can never be shown against one. So if you're really going to forgive, you are really going to forgive. Again, be smart. Don't let people walk over you. Okay. Pretended forgiveness, which is entered into as a duty, is no more effective than a simulated facial surgery. So fake forgiveness is a waste of our time. Your forgiveness should be forgotten as well as the wrong which was forgiven. Forgiveness, which is remembered, is dwelt upon, reinfects the wounds you are attempting to cauterize. If you are too proud of your forgiveness or remember it too much, you are very apt to feel that the other person owes you something for forgiving him, and you forgive one debt, but in doing so, they incur another with you, another debt with you. Okay, so you always have something over their head. Then you don't have a healthy relationship. Okay, there are many common fallacies regarding forgiveness, and one of the reasons that it's therapeutic. There are many common fallacies regarding forgiveness, and one of the reasons that its therapeutic value has not been more recognized is the fact that real forgiveness has been so seldom tried. So real forgiveness has been so seldom tried. Okay, and so people say do forgiveness because it's it's good, as opposed to do forgiveness because ultimately you will be happier. And other people say do forgiveness because it's an effective weapon of revenge, and which he says, yeah, it is. Revengeful forgiveness, however, is not therapeutic forgiveness. Therapeutic forgiveness cuts out, eradicates, cancels, makes the wrong as if it had never been. Therapeutic forgiveness is like surgery. So it gets to the bottom of it, cuts it out, and it never happened. You're not carrying around and drinking that poison any longer. Now, it's going to be up to you whether you want those relationships still intact or not, but you can't keep carrying that poison and drinking it. Okay, so give up the grudge. So first, the wrong, and particularly our own feelings of condemnation against it. Make sure you see that as an undesirable thing rather than a desirable thing. So you don't want to be running around condemning everybody. See that as not something you want to do, so you can give it up. Okay? Okay. And then therapeutic forgiveness is not difficult. The only difficult is to secure your own willingness to give it up and do without your sense of condemnation, your willingness to cancel out the debt and no mental reservations. Willingness is a big thing. And actually, Gary John Bishop of Unfuck Yourself, he talks about willingness a lot. Like, are you willing to let that go? Are you willing to let something happen in your life? Are you not willing to happen? Are you willing to keep a shitty job? Or are you unwilling to keep a shitty job and go after your dreams or find a job that you are actually happy going to? So willingness is something that people talk a lot about, and you're going to find a lot of if that rings true to you, go and look that up, because that's definitely a tool that you're going to want to have in your toolbox. Am I willing or am I unwilling? So basically, he says, make sure you are willing to give it up, because you're not going to be able to forgive unless you are willing to give it up. And then therapeutic forgiveness, so this is where he says, so therapeutic forgiveness, like the real forgiveness, whether you ought to do this or whether you should do it or can reasonably be expected to do it, is a matter which is outside the scope of this book and my own field. So he's saying, I'm not going to teach you guys about forgiveness, but I'm telling you what it looks like. I can only tell you as a doctor that if you will do it, the actual therapeutic forgiveness, you will be far happier, healthier, and attain more peace of mind. However, I would like to point out that this is what therapeutic forgiveness is, and that it is the only type of forgiveness that really works. And if forgiveness is anything less than this, we might as well stop talking about it. So basically, fake forgivenesses, don't even waste your time. And if you're not going to do therapeutic forgiveness, then he's not even going to discuss it with you, because nothing else will work. Not only do we incur emotional wounds from others, most of us inflict them upon ourselves. So the first part was other people wronged you. You're going to forgive that. The second one is ourselves. We inflict things on ourselves. Again, get back to Gary John Bishop and Unfuck Yourself, and that voice inside of your head that you're talking to yourself all day. This and everybody else, right? Everybody talks about it. It's true, because you can do a lot of self-damage to yourself with that voice inside of your head. And where did you get those beliefs? Well, they might have been seeds that other people planted, but at some point in time, you're going to have to recognize what are the seeds and what is that voice that's playing around and around in your head. And then you're going to have to be like, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to rip out that. I'm going to replant something new. Another thing to remember is whenever you have bad habits or something that you want to change, you have to replace it with a good habit. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You have to take something out and put something good into it. So be very, very clear what you want to remove, and be very, very clear what it looks like of the new behaviors or the new habits or the new you of what you actually want, so that you take out the old, put in the new. Okay, so not only do we incur emotional wounds from others, most of us inflict them upon ourselves. We beat ourselves over the head with self-condemnation, remorse, and regret. We beat ourselves down with self-doubts. We cut ourselves up with excessive guilt. Remorse and regret are attempts to emotionally live in the past. Okay, we can't live in the past, people. Excessive guilt is an attempt to make right in the past something we did wrong or thought of as wrong in the past. Emotions are used correctly and appropriately when they help us to respond or react appropriately to some reality in the present environment. So that's the only time emotions are good, is when you're in the present environment. Anything from the past, if you have emotions tied to it, he's saying you're wasting your energy, and we don't want to do that. The important thing is our present direction and our present goal. That's what we want to keep our focus on. Recognize our own errors as mistakes, use them to correct our course and our steering and our guidance, but don't have so much remorse and regret and guilt back there. Move forward. Number 2, you make mistakes. You are not, basically mistakes do not make you. So you are not a mistake. You make mistakes. So for example, I failed is a verb form, and it is used to recognize an error, and you can help lead you to future success. But to say I am a failure, which is noun form, does not describe what you did, but what you think the mistake did to you. You're owning that you are a failure, and that is never the case. This does not contribute to learning, but tends to fixate the mistake and make it permanent. This has been proven over and over in clinical psychological experiments. Remember those words, I am? Those are huge words. Everything you put after those better be a positive thing, because that becomes something that is playing on the soundtrack in your mind. So, okay, so I got a D on a test. I failed. I did not do my best. I learned something though. I need to study different, or I need to pick up new habits, or I can't, go out partying the night before a test, whatever, right? I learned something, I'm going to improve. I failed. I got a D. But I'm a failure. Those are horrible words. Get those out of your vocabulary, and those are not true. You take that D on that test and you use it to correct course and increase your learning, your studying habits, and get, a better grade next time. Or go find other helps, or go find other people who are going to present the information to you a different way so you can grasp it. Children and learning to walk, we say he fell. We don't say he is a faller or he is a stumbler, right? Kids fall, they get back up. You don't make a big deal of it because you know they're going to succeed. Now, here's a very interesting part. He says parents of stutterers, these people basically, they freak out. And next thing you know, their kid, they say, oh my gosh, he's a stutterer. And the kid holds on to that and thinks, oh my gosh, I'm a stutterer. And they believe it. So if you're a parent, you have to be very careful how you choose your words, because your kids are listening. So he said he found that the parents of non-stutterers are more likely to use descriptive terms like he did not speak. Whereas the parents of stutterers were inclined to use judgmental terms. He could not speak. And they're saying, like, when you're learning how to talk, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens. You just don't grasp onto any single one of them and then label your kid as a stutterer. You don't do that. The parents rather than the child, the listeners rather than the speakers, seem to be the ones most requiring understanding and instruction. So the kid was just happily going along learning how to speak. It's the parent who came to conclusions and labeled them and said he is a stutterer. And so be careful with your words and how you do those kinds of things, especially if you are a parent. Dr. Knight Dunlap, he studied 20 years of habits, and the same principle applied to virtually all bad habits, including bad emotional habits. It was essential, he said, that the patient learn to stop blaming himself, condemning himself, and feeling remorseful over his habits if he were to cure them. He found particularly damaging the conclusion, I am ruined or I am worthless, because the patient had done or was doing certain acts. So don't say I am ruined or I am worthless. Never put anything after I am that you don't want to experience in your life. Okay? And then, so remember, you make mistakes. Mistakes don't make you, okay? You make mistakes, you learn from them, but you are not a mistake. Okay, so then the third thing he was pointing out was basically an oyster has this ridiculous shell and they're super protected from everything else, but do not be an oyster, because that oyster, he'll never know joy. He's got a thick shell and he's isolated from everything, but he's not going to be creative and he's never going to know joy. So do not do that. Make your skin a little thicker, but not a shell. And so then his conclusion is an emotional facelift makes you look younger and feel younger. Try giving yourself a spiritual facelift. It's more than a play on words. It opens you up to more life, more vitality, and stuff that youth is made of. You feel younger. You actually look younger. Many times I've seen a man or woman apparently grow 5 or 10 years younger in appearance after removing old emotional scars. Look around you. Who are the youthful looking people you know over the age of 40? The grumpy, the resentful, the pessimistic, the ones who are soured on the world, or the cheerful, optimistic, good-natured people? Which people look happier? Okay? Carrying a grudge against someone or against life can bring on the old age stoop. You know, that stoop, just as much as carrying a heavy weight around your shoulders would. People with emotional scars, grudges, and the like are living in the past, which is characteristic of old people. The youthful attitude and youthful spirit, which erases wrinkles from the soul and the face and puts a sparkle in the eye, looks to the future and has great expectation to look forward to. So always keep planning on something in the future and how happy you are now and thankful and grateful you are for everything you have now. Do not get negative on yourself. So why not give yourself a facelift? Your do-it-yourself kit consists of relaxation of negative tensions to prevent scars, therapeutic forgiveness to remove old scars, providing yourself with a tough but not a hard epidermis instead of a shell of creative living, and a willingness to be a little vulnerable and a nostalgia for the future instead of the past. Okay, so back with that oyster, the hard shell, he's like, to live creatively, we must be willing to be a little vulnerable. We must be willing to hurt a little if necessary in creative living. Okay, so you're going to put yourself out there and you're going to meet someone new, and yeah, they could hurt your feelings or break your heart again, but it's going to be so worth it when you find the right person. And as long as you're doing your self-growth and growing your self-esteem and working on yourself, you're not going to be fooled by someone who's taking advantage of you. And when you find that person to share your life with and enjoy fun activities with, you're going to be so much happier, and you're going to be like, okay, that was worth risking some of that little bit of hurt and some of that little bit of vulnerability. So that was an example he used. Okay, so everybody have an amazing day and do something today that your future self will be grateful you did.